ClubExpress New Event Calendar Administration Overview. For most clubs and organizations, the event calendar is a much-used feature. The latest version brings new capabilities and a revised administrative interface, making it easier and more flexible to create and edit events. This video is an overview focusing on the change and new features and assumes that you're an administrator or an event coordinator who is already familiar with the basic events functionality. We'll primarily concentrate on single activity events and touch on quick events. In another video, we'll go into detail about multi-activity events and other advanced event configurations. We're logged into one of our test clubs as an administrator. Looking at the event calendar, let's go to the Event Manager screen by clicking on Edit in the Page Tools widget, and you can also get to this screen from the Control Panel's Club tab. There are a few changes to the Event Manager screen. The Search for Event panel now has two drop-down lists, one for event type and one for the new Event Status field. For each list, it indicates how many items on the list have been checked, and there's a Check All item that selects or deselects all items in the list. The fields in the Show Events For area have been slightly rearranged with state and metro area near the top. The search result grid shows information about each event and now includes a status field that will show either active, canceled, creating, which applies to single and multi-activity events, or pending approval, which only applies to quick events. Clicking the Add Event button now shows a drop-down menu with three choices: Add Event, which lets you configure both single and multi-activity events, Add Quick Event, and Add Notification. The adding of a quick event or notification is familiar, a single screen with as few options as possible. Notifications are unchanged, but there are a couple of new options for quick events. The new Status field now has choices to set the status of the event. They can be pending approval, active, or canceled. The pending approval comes into play based on fields in the Event Defaults configuration screen, where administrators can determine if approval is required for quick events. This is particularly useful if you have also configured it to allow members to create quick events. If this event requires or recommends registration, you now pick either active members or everyone. If you need more or different registrant types, use a single or multi-activity event where you have full control over who can register, what they will pay, and many more options. When the quick event is completed, it will appear in the Events Manager screen, and if it's pending approval, it won't appear onto the calendar unless it's been approved by an administrator or coordinator. Selecting Add Event displays a new way of defining a single or multi-activity event. It presents a form where you enter the basic info for the event. This includes a title, short description, date, and some other basic information. A new optional field called Date Visible can be set to define when the event should be made visible on the calendar. If set, the event, which is active, will not show up on the calendar until the date visible day has been reached. Then it appears and remains on the calendar. This way you can create events in advance and hide them until you're ready to show them on the calendar. You then specify what additional information is needed for this event. This controls which panels appear for you to configure. The panels available are Formatted Description and/or Rules, Event Contact, Location, Registration and Fees, Who can register and what they will pay, the item for more than one activity that people attend or items that people purchase is automatically checked for a multi-activity event, and a panel called Activity Items is made available. If this is a single activity event, the item is automatically disabled and a panel called Who can register is made available. There's a panel for questions, one for email confirmations and reminders, one for cancellations and/or release agreement, and one for after the event. Note that you can change this at any time by editing the event's basic info panel. We will not check the This panel is complete at this time, and we'll come back to that soon. Clicking Save on the basic info panel creates the event. You are then taken to the new Admin Panels page for this event that has sections for each of the additional items that you specified in the basic info panel. The panels selected also determine the items shown in the progress bar near the top of the screen. Note that most of these panels have defaults that can be configured for each new event, and those defaults are configured in the main Event Manager screen. When editing any panel, you can mark that panel as finished by checking the "This panel is complete" box at the bottom of the panel. You can easily tell if a panel has been marked as complete as it gets a green highlight and check mark in the list. Otherwise, the item has an exclamation point and a red highlight. You can expand and view the details of any panel by clicking on the down arrow for any item. You can also expand or contract all panels at once. To edit the information on a panel, either click the edit icon for that panel, or you can click the item in the progress bar. The progress bar makes it very simple to move between panels. As mentioned, you can always edit the basic info screen and enable or disable panels as necessary. Another way to disable a panel is when editing any panel except the basic info, there is a Remove from Event button that performs the same function as unchecking the panel in the basic info screen. Immediately below the progress bars is a series of admin icons. There are icons that show the current registration, display a menu of reports, create and edit the emailings for this event, make notes for this event, one that lets you export event data, one to share this event on social media, there's one to cancel the event, and there can be one for tracking attendance if appropriate. And finally, there's a link back to the event itself, which in turn shows a link back to this page. Let's take a look at an existing event and explore its panels. In this example, the progress bar shows basic info, plus 6 of the 10 options were checked. So this event has 7 progress bars, and 3 of them have been visited and marked as complete. We also see the 7 items below the progress bar, each with an edit icon in the upper right corner. The basic info screen shows the type of information we saw earlier. Note that if the basic info screen was not marked as complete, the event status is set to Creating, and it's not shown on the calendar. Once the basic info screen is marked as complete, the event's status is changed to Active and will be immediately placed on the calendar subject to the visibility settings you entered. While we're here, I'll turn on all of the panels so we can look at each one in turn. Most panels have Save and Cancel buttons at the bottom. Clicking Save saves the information on that panel to the database and refreshes the page to immediately reflect these changes. The Formatted Description and Rules panel displays a familiar form with a version of the content editor that's relevant to events. This is where you can enter text, graphics, links, and other content to describe your event. The Display Position radio button determines if this formatted content should display at the top or the bottom of the event. This also controls where the basic event description appears. If the event has rules, enter them in the Event Rules text box. On the Event Contact panel, you can select the member as a contact person and then decide whether email and phone should be displayed and to whom. If you choose Notify on registration, the contact person will receive an email whenever someone registers for the event. Note that there is a new option in the Event Manager where you can set a default contact for events, and if set, that member will automatically be listed for each new event. The Location panel lets you select from a list of locations already defined in the Event Administration screen, or you can enter the fields for yourself. To make it easier for your attendees to find the venue, you can also include a map link and a link to a website. Note that the country field defaults to the club's country, and the drop-down list shows a short list of countries. Clicking Show All Countries populates the drop-down with more countries. In the Registration and Fees panel, you set whether registration is required, optional, and various related options. This also determines when and if the Register Now button appears on the event form. You can choose to generate sequence numbers for each registration and/or registrant. You next set the fee and payment options for this event. And if a fee is charged, we'll look at setting the actual fees in the next panel. You can also specify that fees change after a certain date, which will allow for late fees. This event has a fee charge to attend. If there is no fee due to the club for this event, most of the remaining fields are removed. You can set the capacity for the event to limit the number of registrations, set the maximum number of guests, and choose a mailing list category for those who register. Because this is a single activity event, this is also the place to set whether you want to track attendance and attendance credits. For multi-activity events, attendance settings are done at the individual activity level. Finally, you can decide what information should be collected from non-members or guests. The next panel controls who can register. Here's where you select who can register for the event, and this applies to both single and multi-activity events. For single activity events, if a fee is required, you record the fee and any late fees for each registrant type. For multi-activity events, if a fee is required, you'll record the fees when configuring each activity. You build the registrant types in much the same way as you build an emailing distribution list. You select an item from the registrant types list and fill out any additional information required. For example, if it's a member of a committee, you specify the committee. The items available are everyone, for when anyone can attend at the same price, any non-member, a non-member in a specific category, for example, where you have special pricing for members of the press, non-member guest, who is another non-member as a guest, any active member, a member of a specific type, members of a committee, for example, if you provide special pricing for board members, members of a subgroup, which could be a region, district, or other group if enabled, and then a drop-down is presented of the group hierarchy. Member guest, who is another person in your membership, member guest who is another member, and member guest who is a non-member. You can enter an alternate display name for this item, set the fee if it's a single event, and decide if it's only available to administrators. For example, some prices might be hidden and only available under special circumstances. If you had specified in the previous panel that fees change after a certain date, you'll also be able to enter a fee for late registration. After clicking the Add button for registrant type, it's added to a list that shows who can register for the event. You can then make more selections to continue building the registrant list. Note that you can add multiples of any registrant type that does not call for additional information. So you can, for example, add several active member registration types, but only one registration type for member of the Board of Directors Committee. Adding multiple registrants of the same type can be useful, particularly in multi-activity events where you might add two active member registrant types and name them differently and apply them to different activities or combinations of activities. When configuring multiple activities, the list you create here is the list of registrant types that you'll be able to pick from and assign any fees. Another approach to creating a registrant list is to copy the registrant list from another event. Click on Copy from another event, then specify the event category and since date, and then pick the event from the drop-down list. Click Copy to add the registrant types from that event to any that you've already defined. In the list of registrant types that can now register, each item on the list shows its properties and has an edit icon so you can update the information, perhaps to change a fee, and a delete icon to remove the item. Now for an important step. Before leaving this page, be sure to click the Save button to commit your changes, or they will not be saved. On the Questions panel, you select which event-specific questions should appear for this event. The registration questions level is for questions to be answered only once per registration, no matter how many registrants and activities are included. The registrant questions level is for questions that are answered only once per registrant, no matter how many activities are included. A question can appear only once, So if you select it at one level, it won't be available at the other level. Questions are selected from those already created using the Event Manager's Event Questions Configuration screen. When adding a question to a level, you select the question, specify its visibility, and whether or not it's required. For questions that are already in the list, you can edit the settings or remove the question from the event. In the email panel, the text entered in the additional info field appears on the event registrant's confirmation email. You can also schedule automatic reminder emails for upcoming events. You can send up to 2 emails to every active member and/or just to the people that have actually registered for the event. The policy panel is where you configure the cancellation policy and release agreements. If this event requires or recommends registration and cancellations are allowed, you can specify a cutoff date, time, and cancellation fee. If the cancellation policy is to be displayed, you can either use the default, previously configured in the Event Manager screen, or enter text specific to this event. Similarly, if a release agreement is needed, you need to decide who needs to sign it and whether to use the default release or one specific to the event. You can copy the default release text into this event and modify it as required. The After Event panel lets you surface buttons on the event that display either a custom page and/or a photo album. You decide whether to use these buttons and if they should appear immediately or only after the event. The Event Report button could be linked to a page that does a summary of the event and can be any custom page, perhaps a promotion for your next event. And the Event Album button might link to a photo album that has photos of the event. For the Event Report page, click the Event Report page option to select a ClubExpress custom page for the event report, which is typically a description or narrative of what happened at the event. This page must already have been defined. To select a ClubExpress photo album containing photos of the event, the album must have already been defined. Now let's talk about multi-activity event. If an event is configured as multi-activity, some of the panels will be slightly different. For example, the registration and fees panel does not have the capacity or financial information because these are now specific to each activity. The who can register and what they will pay panel is not shown, and instead a panel called Activities/Items is displayed. This is where you configure who can register for the various activities or purchase items for this event. For each activity and item, the grid shows its name, type, if it's required, and number of registrants. In the Maintain column, there are icons for basic info, location, registration, who can register and what they will pay, questions, registrations, reports, and there's a delete icon that appears only if no one is registered. There are buttons to add an activity, add an item, and change the display sequence. When adding a new activity or editing the basic info of an existing activity, you'll see these fields: the activity's title, description, whether it's visible, its date, and start and finish time. For an item, the basic info screen is almost the same, but it does not have a date and time. Activity location asks if it's the same as the event, and if no, a new group of fields appears where you can enter the data. Activity registration and fees is where you set various options: the financial account for any fees collected, whether during the registration process this activity is not selected, or selected and required. You can assign sequence numbers, set capacity, and set whether or not a fee will be charged for this activity, and if so, does the fee change after a certain date. This is also where you set whether you track attendance and attendance credit for this activity. The Activities Who Can Register icon lets you pick from the list of registrant types that you previously defined in the Events Who Can Register panel and determine what, if anything, they will pay. For an item, rather than an activity, the item basic info doesn't show the date and time fields. There's no location icon or screen. Registration adds an item quantities section for one item or more than one item and has default, minimum, and maximum. Now that we have stepped through all of the available panels, let's take a look at how to log attendance. If the event is set to track attendance, an icon called Attendance appears in the admin bar. If this is a single activity event, you can mark attendance for registered members, non-members, and guests. You can register and mark attendance for not yet registered active members with no guests. Or you can unmark attendees that you previously marked as attended, but their registrations will not be canceled. Note that in a single activity event, marking members who have not registered as attended actually registers them for the event and marks them as having attended. This can be handy, particularly in smaller organizations, where you can use this as a quick way of selecting a few people that haven't registered, mark them as having attended, which registers them, and then go unmark them as attended, which leaves them registered. When entering attendance for a multi-activity event, you first select the activity, and then you can either mark or unmark attendance for those who have registered for this activity. So now you've seen most of the changes that have been done to the event module. The new features, capabilities, and updated user interface are all designed to make it easier to create, manage, and display your events. We'll cover some basic and more advanced topics about events in upcoming videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.